This is about what are you passionate about? What are your questions? We really want to answer what you bring to the table. It's really about your story. So we're really about students being able to tell the story of the data. So it's not really focusing on the numbers. It's about what is the story that you're telling? What are you creating through this project? And so when you come to the end of the 14 weeks, or we've done it in 3 weeks, what is the story that you're really trying to tell here with the data? So the numbers for us are only as helpful as they help us further progress students in their story. When you read the newspaper, every day, or you look online and you see a graph, they're telling a story. They're presenting to you what data they have collected and giving it to you in story form, whether you realize it or not. And so your quantitative skills allow you to interpret and understand what's really going on. So it changes the way that you read the newspaper. It changes the way that you approach the news stories that you see. So it really changes everything. And I don't think that this is a class that is only kind of held within the classroom and that you're wondering, oh, well, what are my data skills valuable for now? I never have had to ask that question before. Ever since I took the class my freshman year, almost 5 years ago now, I've never asked the question, so now what am I going to do with this? Or now why is this important? I've always realized that this has changed the way that I view the world. This changes the way that I hear about research and literature. It changes everything. Many people are taught that they're not science people or they're not math people. Even if you have experience with stats, you may say, oh, I'm not a data person, or I'm not a stats person. And I think that really gets us put in a box of, nope, this isn't for me. I may be a social scientist, or I may work in math or physics, but I don't really like working with data. And I think that really can limit us in how we're willing to approach and engage the class.
That's a really good answer.
So my hypothesis that students who were eligible for free reduced lunch were less likely to do well on these standardized tests. And for a variety of reasons, where there's access to resources before school. And so one thing that we do in the course is we do a pretty in-depth literature review. And what I found through looking at the research is that many students who are from lower SES backgrounds come in with less access to books, come in with less communicative exposure. So even in having the ability just to talk about the weather or the news or whatever, they sometimes come in with less experience with that. And so that affects how they engage with these tests. And so what I thought is that students who are coming in at a different level of preparation are not doing as well on these standardized tests. So in fact, we may not be measuring what they're learning in the classroom, but really we're figuring out what they're learning outside. And we're figuring out kind of how they come into the classroom and not really what they learn inside the classroom. Yes, so my hypothesis would be that SES, which is socioeconomic status, has a direct correlation to how well you do on standardized tests. And I thought that correlation was negative. So then my null hypothesis would be that there's no relationship between socioeconomic status and standardized test scores. And so just because you said, oh, my hypothesis were that SES and test scores are related, if we find out that they're not related, that's still a finding. So we still discovered something that we didn't know. And I think that we really encourage students to understand that just because at the end of the semester or the end of the term, it didn't work out the way you thought, you're still finding something new and you're adding something extra to the discourse. And that's what really we're focusing on, is adding new things to whatever field that we're participating in. So you're not proving anything since we're doing correlational studies, but if your findings supported your null hypothesis, or supported the null hypothesis, which means you were kind of incorrect, you still get a great grade if you did all the work. So we're not judging you based on how correctly can you predict whatever the outcomes are. For me, it was especially, I think, helpful that I could say I had that panic moment, and I had the moment where I said, well, can I still drop this course? And so I really had those moments where I wondered if there was a time to get out, but I really had a great support system to say, no, we're gonna get through this together. And I think really the culture that we create in the course is that you're not going through this alone. And so we want you to say, if you're panicking, reach out to us. We're sure that there's someone else panicking too, and we wanna make sure that we're bringing everyone through it and that no one gets left behind. the second day when we come to class and we say, all right, you get to choose your very own research question. Let's get to it. And students say, oh, but how do I do that? And we say, you, whatever interests you, whatever your passions are, we want you to select what your question will be. And I think students are so used, especially if they've been in the university for a while, they're used to being told, this is what you're going to research this semester, this is the topic of study. And so when we say, whatever you want to do, many times in university, students are used to having questions fed to them. And so they're used to kind of having these preset questions or preset research projects when they come into a course. And we definitely flip that on its head and we say, whatever you want to do, you can look at it, you can figure out how to ask that question. And so I think that gives students a little panic in that we don't give them direction in that. We really want the passion to come from them. And we don't think, you can instill passion in someone by, giving them kind of a canned question or a canned path to an answer. We really want the students to be able to, explore that for themselves. And so, yes, that can cause panic, but I think it makes the experience more valuable for the students. And by the end, they're really a lot more excited and happy when they get to do their poster presentation and they are presenting their own research and they're presenting research on questions that they had and not that someone gave to them. People may ask similar questions. They may ask things that have, are related to each other. And then I'm able to help them out. And I'm saying, oh, yeah, someone looked at something similar to that. There's some literature about it in this journal. So I can, direct someone for where to search to. But I find that I don't really get a lot of recycled questions. I think people are very creative that we get. We do offer also new data sets all the time. So we always have new innovative questions coming up. And I think that really helps us out in that area.
What happens with
And so then when we have students who are discussing more well-developed topics, we ask them where can they take it further. So what gap can they fill in the literature? So we always say, if A and B have been connected, then where's C? What else can we do and what else can we plug in there? And there's always a gap. There's always something either that has maybe been explored in a qualitative manner, but not in a quantitative manner. So you want to support these findings with more data. And so there's always another way, another avenue to look at things that have been explored before. Yeah, so another panic moment is when we start working with our statistical softwares. Students get a little nervous, whether sometimes students have come in with programming backgrounds, so they're a little bit more comfortable. But oftentimes we get students who have never worked with the programming software, never worked with the stat software. And so students say, okay, I see a blank screen in front of me. What am I supposed to do? And so we really have to work with them and, making them comfortable with the syntax. Data management can be a very arduous process. And once again, it doesn't have so much canned direction from us. So it's really about how do you want to manage your data? How do you want to formulate your question, even when we're talking about how do we recode data for dummy coding? So just recoding things from yes to no to 0 to 1. All that is really up to you. And once again, when students feel that lack of a direct order of you must do this or you must do that, I think students can get a little bit uncomfortable with that. But we, as we say, love them through it, and we say, nope, you're gonna be able to do this, and you know how you want to ask your question, and so we really help just guide them through it and give them their own direction. And so we don't want to get caught up in, oh, what does this symbol mean, or what does this equation mean in the bigger picture. We really want to focus on telling the story, but we're really talking about connecting A and B, telling your story, and that's what we're focusing on at the end point. I think otherwise, though, we really focus on not getting people bogged down with equations, and so I don't think that that's a big barrier for us. We're learning all these things in the context of a project and in the context of answering your question. So a chi-square or an ANOVA or a linear regression are only helping you in guidance to answering your question. So we don't kind of put these big roadblocks in front of people and just say, understand logistic regression, understand linear regression. We say, how is a logistic regression going to help you understand your answers and help you tell your story? Yeah, so the blog is a new addition to the course, and it's really a part of how we want to make telling the story easier. And so throughout the semester, students post to their blogs not only their assignments, but they post what went well with this assignment. What did I enjoy doing? What didn't go so well? I really hated running the ANOVA because it didn't give me any significant answers. Or I really had a great time running chi-square because I had all categorical variables and it was really useful. And so we really have keeping the blog as a tool to help them tell their story in the end. And what it does is that when it's time to make the poster, maybe if we do the 14-week course, when it's time to make the poster, you may forget what happened in week 2, or you may say, how did I feel in week 3 when I started looking at software? Well, because you put it in your blog and you have a recorded history of that. And so I think it helps alleviate students from having to remember 14 weeks when it comes to their poster. You have a blog to do it for you.
Great.
We are doing all this for our story. And so the poster is really just another tool for us to tell our story when people come to our poster sessions. I think the posters are a very concise way for us to relay a story that we worked on for 14 weeks for the full semester course, and that we can't tell everyone everything. And so a poster really helps us summarize and say, over the semester, I looked at these concepts. This is what the literature is saying, and this is the gap that I'm filling in the literature. This is the additional step that I'm doing in the research. Let me tell you about it in 5 to 10 minutes. And a poster allows us to hone in on those things that we've been working on, but not burdening down the listener in an hour-long spiel, which you could definitely do, because after a semester, you've really become an expert in your field on whatever the specific topic is that you're working on. But you really want to be able to summarize, and then the person can ask you questions and really be an informed listener. So I think the panic comes in when students say, oh, I'm going to have to present this to people. And then they say, what people? And then we say, oh, people are going to come from, different professions and people who really care about this. And they say, well, I don't know these people. Are they from Wesleyan? Are they from elsewhere? And so there's a little bit of panic about who are we presenting to. And I think we really tell the students that you're an expert now on what you studied. So it doesn't matter who you're talking to, because you know the most about what you just studied because you worked on this for a semester and you looked at the literature, you've been involved with the data, you're the expert. And so you shouldn't feel panicked whether you're talking to someone who's been in a field for 20 years or you're talking to a peer and presenting to them. You should feel comfortable because you're an expert now. Oh, I think it makes it all worthwhile. I think it really says, what did I do for the past 14 weeks? I worked on producing this product and then giving it to people. I've helped to disseminate information and knowledge to other people. And I think it makes it so much more meaningful for students. And I can keep it with me and I can tell people about it. I can go present at conferences. It really gives people an additional tool to say, I can even take this further. So this can go beyond what I did for this finite, semester. I can take this on and present this research elsewhere.
So
We're creating long-term researchers and lifelong learners, as we like to say. And so this is not just a semester-long experience. This is going to follow you and be a part of your life for the rest of your life.
that's really nice.
What we're doing is non-traditional. And I think that a final exam may be a way to capture a piece of what you learn, but it's not sharing it with someone else. So, who's going to see the results of your final exam? Your professor and you, and that's about it. And so you're not really getting to showcase and talk about what you've done for this semester. I think there's an important piece of having that face-to-face communication, and then for someone to give you feedback. So when I present my poster for my 5 to 10 minutes, and then someone says, oh, but did you think about this? Or what about this direction? And then it helps you inform maybe things that you could do as a tutorial for the next semester. So you can continue working on this research and continue kind of filling in gaps. The passion-driven statistics course that we're teaching is more than a course. Obviously, we call it a course because it exists within the university, but it's really a lifestyle. And it's really talking about how do we change the way that we view the world, how do we change the way in which we ask questions, and how do we change the way in which we answer those questions. And it really teaches us to, one, be lifelong learners and not think that our experience ends in the classroom, but also to say, hey, I'm reading newspaper today. How can I look at it differently? How can I interpret what I'm reading a little in a different way? And it's so helpful, and I think that it sticks with you. It's a life-changing experience. I mean, you hear the terms thrown around, big data. You see these big data pools and people getting together. We have even school systems now have data teams that, people who just sit around to analyze data. And I think in order to participate in that conversation, you really have to have the tools and the kind of the vernacular to be able to communicate. A year ago, I had no data experience, but a year later, after taking this course, I'm able to communicate and have the conversation. And what that does is it brings more people into the room. And so now we can have people at the table from an African American Studies department, from a religion department, from psychology, from sociology, maybe people who wouldn't normally work with data. They can all be a part of the conversation. And so we're creating a more inclusive environment for people of different majors, for different backgrounds, for those who have experience and those who don't.